Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Cocktail Commentary. I know it's hard to imagine what life was like before we had cocktails, but my friends, there was such a moment in time. And what a fun and glorious moment it must have been, really. In fact, it was a simpler life, less complicated, and in some ways, more satisfying. There were fewer choices. Today, when you go to a bar, you have to wade knee-deep in this martini or that martini or the teeny-weeny martini. You know what I mean. Some of you already know that Jerry Thomas, aka Professor Jeremiah Thomas, is the one who first codified the cocktail in his 1862 book, How to Mix Drinks or the Bon Vivant's Companion. This is the cocktail lover's Bible, since it's the first time that cocktail recipes were published in book form. We know that there were most likely cocktail recipes written on scraps of paper, but not available in a book for the world to see until renowned bartender Jerry Thomas came along. So exactly what type of book with drink recipes was available before 1862? People drank, right? Yeah, they did. They had to get their recipes from somewhere. Interestingly, a woman, that's right, I said a woman, by the name of Mrs. Isabella Beeton, published a world-famous groundbreaking work called Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management in 1861, a year before Jerry Thomas's book, in which she did include a few recipes for spirit-based beverages, along with non-alcoholic drinks. But the word cocktail is nowhere to be found, of course. We have to go back to 1827 to find a book devoted entirely to mixed drink recipes. Its title is Oxford Nightcaps, and yes, it was published for Oxford University. The subtitle is, quote, being a collection of receipts used for making beverages in the university. These are recipes used when dignitaries, such as members of the clergy, would come to pay a visit to the university. Fittingly enough, the first recipe in the book is called Bishop, which is a hot spiced wine. But it appears that the students at Oxford enjoyed their nightcaps as well and were quite discriminating in their drinking habits. It is to be presumed that some of these recipes came from the students themselves. The beverage that dominates the book is one that permeated British society at that time, punch. That's right, before there were cocktails, there was punch. It just so happens that the first written reference to punch was in 1632. That's how far back it goes, more than 200 years before the word cocktail entered our vocabulary. Punch at this time was a highfalutin drink. Yeah, it was considered fancy and ceremonial. Punch making was a ritual among upper-class British gents. I'm not talking about the punch from my youth made with Yago, sangria, Kool-Aid, and a hefty dose of ginger ale. Nope, not that kind. The punch drinks found in Oxford nightcaps are proper punches. They were made with the finest ingredients, the best rum or the best brandy, probably from the Cognac region of France rather than generic brandy. For centuries, English gentlemen bonded over the flowing bowl, as it was known, and passed down the art of punch making from one generation to the next. So what exactly was this phenomenon known as punch? Allow me to quote a little ditty from the aforementioned Oxford nightcaps. Whene'er a bowl of punch we make, four striking opposites we take, the strong, the small, the sharp, the sweet, together mixed most kindly meet. And when they happily unite, the bowl is pregnant with delight. I bet you didn't think that you'd be learning about pregnant bowls in this episode, but here we have it, a punch bowl that is so full of deliciousness that it squeals with delight, making all who partake of it very happy indeed. The word punch most likely derives from the Hindu word for the number 5, panch, or the Persian word punj. Why the number 5? Simple. It takes 5 ingredients to make a proper punch. Brandy or rum were the usual spirits, along with citrus juice, lemons or oranges, sugar, water, and a spice. Since India or possibly Pakistan appears to be the birthplace of punch, it is highly probable that tea was the required spice. And voila, we have the 5 essential components of a punch. In the American colonies, punch was a very popular drink, and it flowed liberally. At one community meeting in New England in the year 1785, 80 men attended and consumed 30 bowls of punch before the meeting and 40 more bowls that evening during dinner. Eventually, colonial wives banded together to put a stop to these raucous events, but the punch bowl remained an effective tool of persuasion at the polls on election day. You know, the philosophy was if you ply the voter with punch, he might be convinced to vote for the candidate of your choice. Eventually, the practice was banned during elections, but punch continued to thrive in various forms. And now you'll learn the rest of the story. In the 19th century, America's wealthy elite spent a great deal of time hosting the most lavish dinners imaginable at restaurants that were created specifically to cater to this ritzy clientele. The Astors, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, J.P. Morgan, and the Carnegies, just to name a few, flocked to the palaces of gastronomy like Delmonico's, the Waldorf Astoria, and Sherry's, where great food was served and guests were often treated to performances that would rival the spectacular and glitzy Las Vegas floor shows of today. You don't believe me? Punch was served at all of these events, mostly a frozen Roman punch topped with a dollop of meringue, served as individual cocktails during the intermezzo, a palate cleanser between courses. In the Gilded Age of 1896, the infamous Seeley Brothers dinner was held in a very private room at Sherry's restaurant, owned by Louis Sherry, whose name became synonymous with fancy ice cream when I was growing up. The dinner, a bachelor party, featured the exotic dancer Little Egypt and her troupe as the guest headliner. For those of you who don't recognize the name, Little Egypt is the young lady who made the Hoochie Coochie famous. Before the evening ended, New York's finest police officers raided the joint. In the chaos, Little Egypt escaped and was nowhere to be found, but she ended up suing the Seeley brothers for non-payment of her fee, and it is said that the brothers were never able to overcome the scandalous publicity. Exactly who were these guys? As it turns out, Herbert and Duncan had quite a lineage to live up to. It seems that their middle name was Barnum. Yes, like P.T. Barnum, the great showman and founder of the circus, who was their grandfather. And now you know the rest of the story.